It's 10 past the hour. American officials are hoping to meet with the 24-member crew of the U.S. spy plane currently being held in China. President Bush is demanding the safe return of the crew and the plane, one of the most sophisticated intelligence planes in the U.S. fleet. Officials say that after consulting with his foreign policy team, Mr. Bush decided not to call Chinese leaders himself. The reason said to be concern over any appearance that the Bush White House is in a crisis mode. CBS's John Roberts is tracking how the president is handling the China challenge.
In his first major foreign policy test, President Bush was taking a hard line. Troubled by appearances, Beijing is dragging its feet.
Failure of the Chinese government to react properly to our request is inconsistent with standard diplomatic practice and with the expressed desire of both our countries for better relations.
Not yet a crisis, the standoff could quickly become one if it drags on a few more days, says James Sasser, the former ambassador to China.
But if they continue to hold the crew and to hold the aircraft and behave in a belligerent fashion, then I think this is going to have a very chilling effect on Chinese-American relations.
Already the nature of the relationship is changing. President Clinton embraced the Chinese as strategic partners.
Any disagreements we will conduct ourselves with mutual respect.
President Bush has made it clear he sees the Chinese not as partners, but competitors.
This is something that puts the Chinese on edge. They're worried about it.
But what has China most worried is the administration's possible sale of sophisticated new weapons to Taiwan, including 4 Arleigh Burke destroyers, each with a state-of-the-art Aegis radar system. They could form the core of a missile defense shield for Taiwan, a capability that has Chinese officials enraged. Senior administration officials tell CBS News that the president is willing to wait a bit for Beijing to make what they call the right decision, pointing out that the process there is slow and complex at the best of times, let alone under these circumstances. John Roberts, CBS News, the White House.
Some insight and analysis now on this China standoff. James Knoll is a senior fellow at the World Policy Institute, a New Jersey-based think tank. He's written extensively on U.S.-China security policies, and he is an expert on international political economics. Welcome this morning. Mr. Knoll, what do you make of all of this?
Well, I think this is a serious crisis. I don't think it portends a real break with U.S.-China relations, but the longer it drags on, I think the worse it'll be.
What do you feel about the Bush administration in terms of, are they ratcheting up their policy against China and making the Chinese nervous?
I think they're playing a fairly cautious line so far. They've made an effort to try not to appear like this is a very serious crisis. They've called on the Chinese to give American diplomats access to the plane's crew, and I think they've done some reasonable, taken some reasonable steps. I don't think they're looking at this yet as something really severe.
Well, 3 days into the situation, it may be a little early for the comparison, but it harkens back to the Pueblo incident back in the 60s when one of our warships was taken hostage, really, by the North Koreans.
That's correct. In that case, it was a spy ship that was off the North Korean coast in international waters, and the North Koreans seized it. This is a little bit similar. There aren't very many parallels, even throughout the whole Cold War conflict with the Soviet Union, to this incident. So it is fairly unique. It's a difficult situation, I think, for both sides. And the longer it drags on, as I say, the more difficult it'll become. So I think the greatest hope is that it be resolved fairly quickly.
There is one report by a military expert in London today that says that perhaps the Chinese have already gleaned information from this U.S. plane and may have either given or sold it to the Russians. Do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't, although access to the plane would certainly be worrisome for American officials. Some of the most sensitive information on the plane could certainly be destroyed. A lot of it would be computer software that could be easily erased, maybe key elements of the encryption software and so forth. The hardware can be destroyed quickly. We don't really know how much time the crew had to destroy the most sensitive equipment on the plane before it was seized by the Chinese. So it's really a question mark at this point.
Do you see this as an escalation, perhaps, of the Cold War?
I'm not sure yet that we could say it's an escalation. I think we have to wait and see how quickly it's resolved. If it drags on for a long period of time, it could indeed be, because I think that will be particularly worrisome for the United States. Certainly the Pueblo incident that you referred to in North Korea more than 30 years ago did drag on for a long time, and came to near fighting with North Korea over that.
Well, what about the timing of, there were reports that the Bush administration may be interested in selling military goods to Taiwan. Could this have China on edge, or are these things mutually exclusive, that this incident had nothing to do with
I really think it has a lot to do with how this incident is going to play out, because particularly the Chinese military is very angry about the U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, or proposed arms sales to Taiwan, and the newest class of weapons that the U.S. is proposing to sell, including, as mentioned, the Burke-class destroyers, are particularly worrisome to Chinese military officials. And since in China a lot of politics is kind of negotiated among different branches of the government and so forth, it may be that the military itself is dragging its feet, partly in protest against the United States and partly in protest against China's own leadership, to try to push them, pressure them, maybe not to get too close to the United States and not to resolve this without getting something for it.
Was this plane, in your understanding, was this plane flying any closer on this routine mission, as the U.S. calls it, than it might have during the Clinton administration?
I don't think so. I think these kinds of flights in international airspace near China are routine. The U.S. did the same sort of thing throughout the Cold War with the Soviet Union. The purpose is to gather electronic intelligence from China, presumably mostly from the Chinese military, by intercepting their radio communications. I don't think this was unusual behavior on the part of the U.S. plane.
Well, what about the interception? Could these interceptions have gone on in the past, and the public may not have known about it until there was an incident like this?
Apparently so. Apparently the Chinese have been making a practice of intercepting these planes and following them, sometimes very closely. Recently, American officials have been quietly protesting this practice to the Chinese over the last couple of months. But certainly, I think no one expected a collision to occur. I think there was more a kind of a ratcheting up of the kind of a brinksmanship game that the Chinese have been playing as maybe a way of demonstrating their opposition to those flights of American planes. But this is really a surprise.
Quickly, how do you think this will play itself out?
I would hope that within a few days at the most, the Chinese would give American diplomats access to the crew and would release the crew. I don't think the Chinese will get the bargaining leverage from this that they expect, although, as I mentioned, I believe that's one of their objectives in trying to drag this out. I think they'll realize that they really don't have much of an option to gain from this.
James Knoll of the World Policy Institute here in New York. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And just ahead, on Up to the Minute, baseball season gets in full swing. And college basketball crowns its champion. This is CBS News, Up to the Minute.
Night and day, the calls. Save me this, save me that. I'm a gecko, not Geico. So stop calling me.
Geico. A 15-minute call could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
So you want to change your name? People confusing you with Geico, calling you at all hours? What name would you like?
Komodo Dragon, please.
Geico. A 15-minute call could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
These things are always difficult.
I understand.
Because of the merger, we now have two of everything, including two CIOs, you and Phil. You know I only need one guy.
I understand.
Yet we still have the hairiest integration project ever. Servers, storage, databases. It needs the right guy.
I understand.
You're the guy.
I'm the guy.
And that's when it hits you. You are so ready for IBM.
What about Phil?
Oh, he volunteered for some job in Paris.
Paris?
You can't fool a migraine. If the stuff you're taking doesn't treat every part of it, you've still got a migraine. That's why I take Excedrin Migraine. I saw here that it's been approved by the FDA for all the symptoms of a migraine. Tylenol isn't. But if you want, give it a try. Me, I'm done fooling around.
Excedrin Migraine. Powerful relief.
Garden Claw, one of America's favorite garden tools, is good as gold. It adjusts to fit gardeners of all sizes. Garden Claw Gold helps you cultivate, loosen, aerate, and weed without being tough on your back. The claw's steel tines tear through all kinds of soil, even clay, bringing moisture and oxygen to plants' roots. and it turns weeds and leaves into beneficial mulch. Garden Claw Gold makes a great gift.
Available at Lowe's and participating Ace, True Value, and Do It Best hardware stores, makes a great gift.
Now's your chance to drop those extra pounds. We've got a weight loss plan that could slim you down for good. Also, would walking away from your marriage keep it together? This woman took a leave of absence. We'll see what happened. Plus, don't miss David Copperfield's most daring, death-defying act of magic. Wake up to what's happening coming up on The Early Show with Brian Gumbel and Jane Clayson.
Now there are 3 great places to get the best in financial news. CBS Television, CBS Radio, and at cbs.marketwatch.com. CBS, your eye on the market. Could your pharmacist deny you your legally prescribed drugs? Tonight on the CBS Evening News.
It's 21 minutes past the hour. Here are the top stories on CBS News up to the minute. Diplomats are expected to visit the 24 crew members of a U.S. spy plane today. The crew on the plane being detained by Chinese officials since colliding with a Chinese military jet and making an emergency landing Saturday night. The Senate has passed the McCain-Feingold plan for campaign finance reform by a vote of 59 to 41. That measure now heads to the House. President Bush has signaled he will sign it if it gets to his desk. At least 2 people are dead, more than a dozen missing after an Alaskan fishing boat disappeared from the Bering Sea. This was opening day for most of Major League Baseball. The New York Yankees, looking for their 4th straight World Series title, began this season as they finished the last with a victory. The Bronx Bombers beating Kansas City 7-3. But fans of former Yankee Darryl Strawberry are worried. He is under arrest in a Tampa hospital after disappearing from a residential drug treatment center last Thursday. CBS's Mark Strassman reports.
Darryl Strawberry had one of baseball's sweetest swings and its saddest stories. A can't-miss Hall of Famer who struck out long before Cooperstown. His playing career and his life undone by personal demons, mostly drugs, and another nasty curve, aggressive colon cancer.
It's a very difficult time.
Last Thursday, he disappeared from a court-ordered stay at a Tampa halfway house and hasn't been seen in public since.
Not only is he a danger to himself, he can be a danger to other people. And that's why we strongly feel he needs to be in prison.
Strawberry has become infamous for blown second chances. Convicted repeatedly for illegal drug use, he's been in and out of rehab programs, jails, and courtrooms. Last fall, fighting cancer and his addiction, Strawberry was clearly weary.
I'm a good person, but I've totally made some bad decisions in my life. Life hasn't been worth living anymore.
Fighting drug addiction, along with the chemotherapy treatments, which affects them physically and mentally. And it's an horrendous thing.
Opening day at Yankee Stadium, there's great concern among former Strawberry teammates like Dwight Gooden.
Obviously, it's a situation that you hate to see come up, but just hopefully, that they find him okay, for his sake and as well as his family. And you just keep your fingers crossed and you pray for the guy.
While some fans are sympathetic.
He would definitely have been a Hall of Famer if, everything was okay and he stayed healthy. Just hope he's okay.
Others have heard enough of Darryl Strawberry.
He's had too many chances. Those are the rules.
He's not our problem anymore.
No.
Ray Negron, a consultant with the Cleveland Indians and a former Yankees employee, tells the Associated Press that Strawberry has resurfaced, is okay, and has been hospitalized. Beyond that, no further details for now. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Tampa.
Elsewhere in sports, Duke wins the NCAA men's basketball championship for the 3rd time. The Blue Devils defeating Arizona last night by 10. It was a close game most of the way. Mike Dunleavy here with 2 of his team-high 21 points. Shane Battier added 18 with just minutes left, and the Wildcats narrowing the gap to just 3. Battier, along with Jason Williams, each scored 4 points, helping the Blue Devils of Duke claim the NCAA title 82-72. The Colorado Rockies fans went home happy after their home opener against the Cardinals. Very happy. New pitcher Mike Hampton shut down Mark McGwire for 8 1/3 innings for his team's 8-0 shutout. And after a serenade from Engelbert Humperdinck, Giants fans watched as Barry Bonds knocked out homer 495 for his career with his solo shot to center. Bonds also threw out San Diego Padre Tony Gwynn. The 40-year-old was returning for the first time since June. Giants win 3-2.
you participate in the March of Dimes Walk America, you really are a hero. Because you're helping to give babies who are premature a fighting chance. Unready to meet the world, many of these babies have to struggle just to survive. But they're not alone, because the March of Dimes is there to help them win their fight. And you can help too. So join Walk America and remember, you're a hero when you walk to save babies.
Breast cancer doesn't just affect women. This year, over 40,000 women will die. The Breast Cancer Research Foundation has given over $20 million in research grants. Please, help us make a difference. Call now, 1-866-FIND-A-CURE.
Over 3 million Americans stutter, and more than half of these are children. If you, your child, or someone you care about stutters, let us help you. For over 50 years, the nonprofit Stuttering Foundation has been helping those who stutter. For more information and resources on stuttering, call the Stuttering Foundation toll-free at 1-800-992-9392. That's 1-800-992-9392. Or visit our website at www.stutteringhelp.org.
Imagine yourself serving in today's Peace Corps.
I wanted adventure. I wanted to go out, learn about a new culture, learn a new language, and bring it back to the United States.
I joined the Peace Corps because I think Peace Corps as a development organization is one of the best in the world.
You're helping people, you're working in the community, and people really appreciate you so much for every little bitty thing that you do.
It's fun. Make a difference. Join the Peace Corps. The toughest job you'll ever love.
European leaders aren't exactly breathing easy this morning after President Bush's rejection last week of the Kyoto Protocols. The measure aimed at reducing greenhouse gases is creating more political hot air now that the U.S. won't agree to it. With this morning's comment from London, here's Simon Bates.
There are those on this side of the Atlantic who would say that to annoy the Germans isn't necessarily a bad thing. The trouble is that your new president seems to be doing his best to annoy the Germans and everyone else, not just here in Europe, but throughout the world. Last week, President Bush chose to dump the Kyoto Accords, the international agreement to cut carbon dioxide emissions, just as the German Chancellor was in Washington to meet him. The Chancellor was not pleased. Europe is not pleased. Correction, Europe is incandescent. After all, the Kyoto Accords, agreed by Al Gore, are really a symbolic gesture that the U.S. is serious about decreasing global warming. Now, forgive me for poking my nose into your domestic politics, but by dumping them, your president seems hell-bent on ruining the environment for all of us, eventually turning the world into a rather large swimming pool. I know he said it's about jobs and the economy, but that's also true here in Europe, and we're all cutting back. I'm not going to go as far as one British politician who dismissed President Bush as pig-headed and blinkered and in the pocket of big business and the oil barons who donated so many petrodollars to his campaign. But it really does seem that he's determined to rebuild Fortress America and make it more aggressive. And making America more aggressive often makes the world a more dangerous place. I suppose, though, that global warming does have its advantages to this administration. For when the seas rise as a result of the Kyoto Accord being abandoned, the first areas of the U.S. to be submerged by the rising water level could well be Massachusetts, Long Island, New York, California, and the cities of the Great Lakes, all havens for the Democrats. It might make future election nights a darn sight shorter for us all. This is Simon Bates for CBS News in London.
This is CBS News Up to the Minute.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News. As medical technology moves the abortion debate from the clinic to the pharmacy, pharmacists find themselves facing a growing dilemma between their personal beliefs and their professional responsibilities.
I told them which drugs I don't dispense.
Could your right to legally prescribe drugs be denied? Eye on America, tonight on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Experience you can trust.
morning. It's Tuesday, April 3rd. From CBS News in New York City, this is Up to the Minute. I'm Ed Crane, and here's what's happening. China today has given the go-ahead for American officials to visit the 24-member crew of a U.S. surveillance plane forced to land on its territory. But Beijing's offer falls well short of demands made by President Bush.
I am troubled by the lack of a timely Chinese response to our request for this access. Our embassy officials are on the ground and prepared to visit the crew and aircraft as soon as the Chinese government allows them to do so.
There is no sign the Chinese offer to permit contact with the aircrew includes access to the crippled EP-3 spy plane. It was forced to land at a military base on the island of Hainan following Sunday's mid-air collision with a Chinese warplane. David Martin reports.
It's been more than 2 days now since the Navy spy plane made its emergency landing at this Chinese airbase, and what began as a flap is turning into a standoff. In his first public comments, the president spelled out American demands.
Our priorities are the prompt and safe return of the crew and the return of the aircraft without further damaging or tampering.
U.S. spy satellites can see the plane sitting on the tarmac at the Chinese base, and officials say it does not appear badly damaged. In his final radio transmission, the pilot reported armed Chinese soldiers had surrounded the plane. The aircraft is crammed with electronic gear used by the National Security Agency to eavesdrop on Chinese communications.
The crew should have destroyed as much equipment as possible, but Pentagon officials admit the Chinese probably got their hands on some of this country's most sophisticated spy gear. There's not much the U.S. can do about it except complain the Chinese are violating the plane's immunity under international law.
This immunity precludes foreign search, boarding, or seizure, or detention of the aircraft without U.S. consent.
For 20 minutes, 2 Chinese jets flew alongside the Navy plane as it conducted its mission. 2 planes bumped, the Chinese jet crashed, and the American plane headed for the nearest airfield. The U.S. insists it was China's fault.
The faster, more maneuverable aircraft has the obligation to stay out of the way of the slower aircraft. Our aircraft fly routinely straight and level. It's pretty obvious as to who bumped into whom.
China's foreign minister claimed it's not our plane which hit the American plane. Quite the contrary, our pilot is still missing. American officials have been told they can meet with the crew on Tuesday.
But that doesn't satisfy the U.S. demand to release both the crew and the plane. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
On another foreign policy front, President Bush told Egypt's visiting President Mubarak the U.S. remains committed to the Mideast peace process. But Mr. Bush says he hopes Mubarak can pressure Yasser Arafat to end the growing violence between Israel and the Palestinians. And there is more violence, as David Hawkins reports.
The Israeli rockets incinerated the pickup truck and its driver. Israel says it targeted 29-year-old Mohammed Abdel Al, a member of the militant group Islamic Jihad, because he was a terrorist. Israel has assassinated more than a dozen Palestinians during this conflict, though it prefers to call the attacks initiated actions. Still, the assassinations have drawn worldwide condemnation and outraged calls for revenge among Palestinians. Palestinian officials blamed Israel for the recent upsurge of violence. In Hebron, radical Jewish settlers bombed an empty Arab grocery store, injuring 6 Israeli soldiers. And Bethlehem was again a battleground. After an exchange of heavy gunfire, Israeli tanks shelled Palestinian positions. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak met with President Bush and urged him to reinvigorate American peacemaking efforts in the region.
We'll work together to try to convince all parties involved to lay down their arms.
But there's no sign that either side is ready to do that. So it'll take a lot of convincing at a time when the situation has never been worse. David Hawkins, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
The arrest of strongman Slobodan Milosevic is paying off for Yugoslavia. Secretary of State Pals decided the Balkan nation qualifies for $50 million in U.S. aid, and he says Belgrade must continue to cooperate with the UN War Crimes Tribunal if it wants more. The Senate has begun debate on a budget blueprint for fiscal 2002. It includes that $1.6 trillion tax cut proposed by the president, a vote expected later this week. Senators on Monday said yes to campaign finance reform.
On this vote, the yeas are 59, the nays are 41, and the bill as amended is passed.
12 Senate Republicans joined 47 Democrats in approving the bill, co-sponsored by Arizona's John McCain and Wisconsin's Russell Feingold.
I recognize, and I think many Americans do, that this is modest reform. There's much more that needs to be done to bring people back into the political system, but this is a major step in the right direction.
This is something we're very happy about, but the time we're going to pop a cork will be the day that the President of the United States signs this bill, and that we're all together in the Rose Garden at the time of his signature. That's when we will really celebrate.
The bill now moves to the House, where Republican leaders are vowing to stop it. Washington has thrown the first punch in what promises to be a nasty fight with the United States' biggest trading partner. Here's Adrian Arsenault of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Several all-nighters in a Washington law firm, and here it is. The case against Canada. Delivered Monday morning to the U.S. Department of Commerce.
The big boxes are the countervailing duty petitions, and the small boxes are the anti-dumping duty petitions.
Briefs calling for a penalty of up to 78%. That could be as much as $8 billion to be imposed on Canada for what the U.S. lumber industry says amounts to years of cheating.
We have, in fact, been devastated by the imported lumber that has permeated our markets.
Mills are closing at an average of one a day. Unemployment is rising, and our companies are hemorrhaging red ink.
The U.S. lumber industry has strong political